Supreme Chancellor Obi-Wan Kenobi by Stone Freak. Chapter 50. Assassination Attempt Number 3. Obi-Wan thinks back to the previous night. He slept well, knowing that Master Yoda was watching over him, though he cannot help the feeling of shame that washes over him. He shouldn't need Master Yoda's help like this. He's dealt with his prescience since he was a child. He should be used to it by now. He tries to accept the feeling and let it go. He knows that Master Yoda would likely smack his shin with the gimmer stick and say something about there being no shame in needing help, and how asking for it shows greater wisdom than breaking your back trying to carry all burdens on your own. Obi-Wan knows that Master Yoda would be appalled at the idea that asking for help is something to be ashamed of, that having limits is something to be embarrassed about. The thought almost makes him feel a phantom ache in his shin, and he smiles. Yes, Master Yoda would likely find such nonsense from an adult Jedi worthy of a rap of the shin to remind him to be kinder to himself. Shaking his head to clear his thoughts, Obi-Wan turns back to the matter at hand. The feeling of ever-approaching danger has yet to leave, which means that whatever it is he's being warned about, it has yet to happen. He stares at his planner and frowns slightly, tapping a finger softly against his desk. It's difficult, to say the least, to plan for something when you don't know what that something is. Perhaps he should bring some troopers with him when he leaves his office for today's meetings. Having a few extra pairs of eyes to search for danger would be beneficial. Not to mention that should something happen, having them around could very well help save lives. He has a meeting with Senator Biwa, Himesh, Chuchi, and Acting Vice Chancellor Hahanash regarding a treaty between Silian III and Ili-Hilan, starting the 9th hour and set to end 30 minutes before lunch at 12th hour. At the 13th hour, his meeting with Bail Organa regarding a bill concerning the relocation of war refugees will start. Obi-Wan rubs his beard and considers his predicament again. He cannot bring all his troopers. Some must remain to guard his offices. He has too many important documents and notes in them to risk leaving them unattended. Besides, bringing too many guards could be taken as an insult. The senators could see it as Obi-Wan implying that they're untrustworthy, or that he suspects some sort of foul play. Any other day, Obi-Wan would go to the meeting alone. He generally hasn't been bringing guards to meetings where he doesn't leave the upper floors of the Senate office building. But with the way the Force is constantly sending out warning signals, well, Obi-Wan simply cannot risk it. He's not one to play fast and loose with people's lives, not to mention the potential for political fallout from accidental perceived slights or favoritism. Obi-Wan shakes his head again. He'll bring Waxer and Boyle with him for the day. The rest of the troopers will stay in the guard room to make sure no one gets into the office or stationed around the office building. Decision made, Obi-Wan glances to the clock again, nodding to himself. He'll have to leave soon unless he wants to arrive late, which means discussing his plans with the men immediately. He puts his planner down and gets to his feet. Politics wait for no man. Obi-Wan glances at the clock discreetly. The meeting was supposed to end 30 minutes before lunch hour, but now it is already 15 minutes past lunch hour. Senator Biwa has gone over the set meeting time by almost 45 minutes already. Lunch hour has started, and if Obi-Wan wants to have time to eat anything besides ration bar from his office before his next meeting, this one must wrap up quickly.
All in all, I think it's clear that Silian III has broken the treaty with Ili-Hian, and as Senator of Ili-Hian, I cannot allow it to stand. I'm sure you understand, Chancellor.
Senator Biwa says, his nasal voice picking up a few octaves toward the end of that sentence. I understand your position, Senator, and I appreciate that you called for a private meeting with a few neutral parties present, including myself, before you brought this before the Senate as a whole. Obi-Wan says smoothly if he wants this meeting to end, he will need to play his cards right. At the same time, I also understand Senator Himesh's position, and I believe that further investigation into the treaty and the situation is warranted before any decisions are made. Senator Chuchi nods her head. I much agree with Chancellor Kenobi. She casts a glance toward the other senators before she continues, and I am very pleased to see that you are both willing to negotiate and discuss the situation with diplomacy before any drastic measures are taken. Her words very much go in line with the sort of person Obi-Wan has come to understand that she is. Her experiences on Orto Plutonia seem to have shaped much of her views regarding battle and diplomacy. She shows a controlled temper and a calm personality, with the timidity she had during that time now gone. She's grown into her role. She would likely have made a good Jedi, Obi-Wan thinks to himself with a small smile.
Agreed, Senator Hahanash says, tilting her head to the side. I must ask that this meeting draw to a close now, as I'm afraid it's already past lunch hour, and I will soon have other duties that demand my attention, as I'm sure do you all as well.
Senator B1 momentarily looks like he wishes to... Senator B1 momentarily looks as if he wishes to argue, but finds himself without anything to say. He nods and murmurs an agreement instead. Senator Himesh glances at him and follows suit. Obi-Wan looks at Boyle and Waxer, standing on each side of his chair, though just one step behind, before he returns his attention to the gathered politician. I must thank you for the meeting, gentle beings. I will ensure an independent and neutral investigation is conducted, and once it finishes, I will call you all for another meeting. Obi-Wan smiles blandly at the gathered group.
Thank you, Chancellor, Senator Biwa says. I will leave it in your capable hands.
Obi-Wan gets to his feet and makes a customary Jedi bow. Years of habit from diplomatic missions hard to curb. He may be the person with the greatest power, both physically and politically, in this room, but it would be truly gauche to remind the others of it. The Force is all but screaming in Obi-Wan's head like warning sirens going off in a failing spaceship. It's a rising crescendo in the back of his mind, and soon it becomes an almost physical itch. The sensation as a whole is much as if every passing moment takes him closer and closer to whatever it is the Force has been warning him about. As if he's a hair's breadth from impact. Senator Tucci and Vice Chancellor Hahanash step up to him as Senators Biwa and Himesh draw away from the group. Away from the meeting table toward Senator Biwa's personal desk to discuss something in low voices. Normally, Obi-Wan would be able to listen in on their conversation, but with the constant warnings from the Force and his need to pay attention to other things, he finds it too much effort, not to mention rude. He can only hope that they're not going to get into an argument regarding the treaty and will instead keep level heads as they already have. Obi-Wan really would hate it if they were to stop being so reasonable. Senator Tucci, brushing a strand of hair out of her face, catches his attention, and he turns his attention to her more fully.
What is your schedule for the rest of the day, Chancellor?
She says, and graces him with a small smile. In the immediate, I will have lunch. After lunch hour has passed, I have a meeting with Senator Organa. Said meeting is expected to take up the rest of my afternoon, he says, and smiles in return.
I see,
she says, and pauses briefly before she continues.
I was wondering if perhaps you and Vice Chancellor Hahanash might be willing to join me for lunch.
Obi-Wan blinks in surprise. Unexpected, but not unpleasant. I would be delighted to. He turns to Hahanash. What do you say, Vice Chancellor? She inclines her head again, her large horns making the movement seem more exaggerated than it actually is.
I believe that would be a lovely way to pass the lunch hour,
she says, and makes her people's customary gesture of thanks with her left hand, signaling her appreciation of having been invited.
Do lead the way, Senator Tucci.
Obi-Wan nods and turns to the other two senators to bid his farewell. Well then, Senator Himesh, Senator Biwa, we will take our leave first. May the Force be with you, he says, and bows slightly again. The two nod, bow a bit, and give their own farewells in return. Senator Himesh's long neck sways slightly. The movement is slightly reminiscent of the Kaminoans. Kaminoans, Camino, the inhibitor chips. No mention of them beyond that one memo in the databases as far as you could find. Oh! The virus! Of course! It was rewriting files when LA neutralized it, so who's to say that it didn't have time to alter a few other files before she noticed? Which means that there is a possibility of unaltered records in the backup files, just as there were with the mission reports. Of course there was something he was missing last night. He'll have to contact LA for access to one of the backup drives immediately. Senator Tucci and Vice Chancellor Hahanash won't begrudge him a single comm, or perhaps he should... The Force screams at Obi-Wan! The ghost sensation of fire washes over him, and suddenly he knows. He flinches backwards, bumping into Boyle and Waxer, and gathers the force around everyone close enough for him to reach in an instant. The explosions tear through the room. Rio Tucci cries out in pain as she's thrown across the room and slams straight into the wall, banging her head before she crashes to the floor, her head smashing against it. Her ears ring and hurt, and she feels dizzy. There's an ache in her arm, there are black spots in her vision, and she wants to scream with the pain. She squeezes her eyes shut and tries to breathe through it, tries to calm down. What in the core world's happened? She opens her eyes to take in her surroundings and is met with complete chaos. There is debris everywhere. Something is spewing smoke, and before she can properly catalog everything, there's a loud crashing sound, and she's moving against her will, rolling down something. She cries out, her injured arm slamming against the ground with every rotation before she comes to a stop, smashing into something hard and full of sharp edges. More rumbling, the sound of a siren, the crackle of fire, and then further agony. Her leg is burning, and she finally screams. By the fates above, she can barely breathe through the pain as she tries to roll away, tries to move, but the agony is threatening to tear her apart. Her left arm will not move, but with a surge of adrenaline, she moves into a sitting position without using it to support herself. With the edges of her thick cloak, she pats out the fire on her skirt, regardless of the pain each pat against the injured flesh causes. Fates preserve me, she breathes, chest heaving and tears overflowing her eyes.
There is a fire in Sector 23B, 42H. All building occupants are required to leave the building immediately.
The robotic voice from the speakers startles her, muffled and almost drowned out by the ringing in her ears. She looks away from the terrible sight of her burned leg to take in her surroundings instead. The burning debris is so hot. She slowly inches away from it further, both to get away from the heat and to avoid breathing in the hot air or the smoke. Above her is a large hole, though smoke is obscuring most of what is above. The floor of Senator Biwa's office, giving way due to the structural instability caused by the explosion, must have been what sent her rolling. Senator Biwa. That's right, she wasn't alone. She starts scanning her surroundings more closely. Where are the others? She has to find someone else. She looks around. She can either move to the left or to the right. She closes her eyes, swallows heavily, and then chooses to go right. Crawling with an injured leg and a useless arm is harder than Rio could have ever imagined, but she needs to find someone else. She can't bear the thought that she might be the only survivor, not to mention she wants to get as far away from the source of the fire and the billowing smoke as possible. She knows that if she inhales that hot air, the ringing in her ears hasn't let up, but she can still hear other things. The groaning of duracrete and durasteel, the sparking of broken wires, the crackle of fire, the constant repetitive robotic message telling everyone to evacuate the building. As she moves, her left arm hangs uselessly at her side, and she knows that without it she has no chance of climbing back up the piece of flooring she rolled down. No, she needs to find a way out. A door, anything, on this floor level. That or someone who can help her. It likely doesn't take her long to hear the sound of coughing in front of her, though every moment feels like an eternity. She continues her slow crawl and rounds the corner. Vice Chancellor Hahanash! She exclaims loudly, flooded with relief at finally seeing another living soul. Hahanash is sitting against the wall, holding her hands over the lower part of her face, obscuring it from view. Senator Chuchi, Hahanash says, though it comes out slightly muffled by her hands. In the low light, Rio can see a trickle of blood sliding down her forehead and onto one of her hands. Are you terribly injured, Senator? Rio asks, crawling closer. Hahanash shakes her head, but keeps her hands firmly covering the lower half of her face. Not as such, no. I think I might have some damaged ribs, possibly some damage to my airways, but my people are hardy and with thick skin. Her voice is hoarse and strained. However, I believe the Chancellor must have done something to lessen the effects of the blast. I saw him flinch and lift his hands just before the explosion occurred. Rio frowns and tries to think back. Had Chancellor Kenobi moved? She can't remember. The only thing she does remember, however, is seeing his face and the sudden pallor on it. Perhaps he sensed something through the Force? She finally manages to arrange herself in a mostly comfortable position, though her leg hurts more than she could truly bear. It's hard to concentrate with the constant smarting of agony. She all but collapses against the wall, letting it hold her weight.
I will admit that I know nothing about how the Force works.
Senator Hahanash turns her head to the side slightly. The movement looks odd with the way she keeps her hands over her face.
Why is she? Your veil!
Rio speaks her thought as soon as it pops into her head. It seems to have gotten lost in the blast, and I have nothing to replace it with unless I tear a bit from my dress. However, she trails off and won't meet Rio's eyes anymore. Rio's eyebrows knit in confusion and her mouth turned downward. Why is Senator Hahanash suddenly not looking at her? She knows she's covering her face with her hands because her veil is missing, but... Oh, of course. If her veil is missing, then she must use something else to cover the lower half of her face in front of others, as is the custom of her people.
I assume I arrived before you could do so,
Rio concludes, nodding to herself.
I will look away, and you can tear a bit from my dress, Vice Chancellor. It's already ruined,
she offers before she closes her eyes and turns her face away. Thank you, Senator Tucci. The words are heartfelt, and Rio smiles despite the situation at hand. Boyle has seen his fair share of explosions as a soldier, but he's never been actively caught in one before. He's certain the general did something, since Boyle's not dead. And the only thing he can think of that could possibly allow you to survive being in the middle of an explosion would be some kind of Jedi Force thing. His armor seems to have shielded him from the worst of it too. Cataloging his injuries, he knows he's a little banged up. His elbow is hurting like a fucking Gundark has been gnawing on it, and something seems to be dribbling out of his left ear. But in a mostly good condition. Ugh, ear dribble. He shakes his head to clear it, resolutely ignoring the slight dizziness he feels, and starts taking in his surroundings. He needs to find Waxer, the general, and the senators. Any potential health issues can wait until he's made sure that they aren't worse off than he is. The surrounding area is a fucking mess. Not that Boyle expected anything else considering the explosion. He appears to be on one of the last pieces of floor in his vicinity that hasn't crumpled down into the room beneath the office. There's a gaping crater, more or less, with smoke billowing out of it, and there are glass shards from the utterly demolished windows everywhere. He should call for backup and definitely healers, too. He checks his comm. No lights? No response. Crap, it's completely fried. The shockwave of the explosion must have taken it out. Boyle rubs a hand over his helmet visor and hopes that Waxer's comm survived. No, if calling for help is going to have to wait, then the next step is finding survivors and ensuring the general and Waxer's safety. And the other senators as well, but Boyle can acknowledge his priorities in his own head. Glancing back to where he knew two senators had been standing when the blast rocked the room, he sees two crumpled bodies, one of them half buried in debris. Crap. He gets to his feet, knowing he needs to check the bodies first before he goes down the hole. Otherwise, he risks not being able to get back up. He moves slowly, almost like he's sneaking, as he makes his way over, occasionally testing the floor first, unwilling to risk making more flooring fall and possibly land on someone. The floor, despite its condition, seems mostly stable. He doesn't hear any cracking noises or the like. In fact, Boyle's surprised with how quiet everything is. Shouldn't some sort of alarm system have gone off considering there was an explosion? Perhaps the alarm system got taken out by whoever planted the bombs? Shaking his head, Boyle decides that speculation will have to wait. Right now, he needs to check up on everyone else and come for help. With a resolute nod to himself, Boyle continues on his way to the two bodies. Senator Himesh, who looks a bit like a cross between a Mon Calamari and a Loth cat, but with a long neck, is the closest. Half his body is covered beneath the remains of what was probably a desk once. He isn't moving. At all. In fact, Boyle can't even see any rise and fall of his chest. Fuck. Shit. Sith, spit, may the waters of Kamina swallow the bomber. Halt! Boyle removes his left glove and puts his hand around the nose area. No breaths. He presses his fingers to Himesh's neck instead, looking for a pulse. However, he quickly realizes the futility of it as he has no idea where he should be feeling it. He's not a medic, and he's certainly never seen anyone of Himesh's species before. And he decides to test the wrist instead. No luck. As far as Boyle can tell, the senator is as dead as a Kaminoan sealfish on Tatooine. Boyle shakes his head and gets to his feet, tucking his glove into his belt for now, and moves on. There's nothing to be gained by staying with the dead. He walks around the desk and heads over to the second slump body. Body turns out to be the right word too, because Senator Biwa is definitely dead. There's blood coming from his nose and ears, and there's... Boyle gets back to his feet and puts his glove back on. No need to check for a pulse. He might not be a medic, but there's no way Biwa survived that. Both bodies confirm Boyle's suspicions about how the general must have used the Force to somehow shield the people who were close to him, because he's in too good shape compared to these two. He was close enough to the blast that the shock wave should have fucked his lungs up at the very least, but they seem to be just fine. Shaking his head and sighing, Boyle returns to the large hole. He'll need to get down there to see if he can find someone else. The rest of them should be okay, though, aside from probably Waxer, not in as good shape as Boyle, considering their lack of armor. Getting down the hole is easy. The floor has collapsed in a way that's more or less created a slide. It seems to be mostly dark down the hole. Was it a storage room without windows beneath Biwa's office? At least partly because of the smoke rising from it. Carefully sliding down the floor piece, Boyle wonders if the lights were turned off in the room below, or if simply no lights survived the explosion. He can see a bit of fire, but the smoke is thankfully rising and being swept out the broken windows in the office above. Less chance of anyone getting issues with smoke inhalation, then. Reaching the bottom, he looks around. Once at the bottom, he can see that it's slightly dim from many broken lights, but not so much that he can't see. Some still work, and the fire is pretty much a light source, as are the sparks from broken wires. Boyle finds himself at a crossroad. Either he goes left, or he goes right, and he has no way of knowing which way would be the most beneficial. He starts to go to the right, but changes his mind quickly. He's not sure why, but he feels like he should go left first. Maybe the general and his feelings have started to rub off on Boyle. Turning on his heel swiftly, ignoring the way his elbow smarts and the black spots that appear in his vision from the abrupt movement, Boyle sets off to the left, hopefully to find Waxer. Walking around the huge slabs of Duracrete and Durasteel, Boyle catches sight of Waxer almost immediately. Looks like the Force is with him, as the general would say. It's also now that Boyle realizes that his hearing must be out, because Waxer has removed his helmet and is clearly cursing up a storm, but Boyle can't hear it at all. Shit! Waxer! He can't even hear himself. Fuck! Boyle hurries over and sees quickly why Waxer is cursing. One of his legs is trapped beneath a heavy-looking slab of debris. Waxer turns to him and starts talking, gesturing towards his leg and the mess holding him in place. He's speaking so swiftly that Boyle doesn't have a chance to read his lips, and wouldn't even if he'd been trained for it. Waxer! Waxer! Boyle has no idea how loudly he's saying it, but by the way it seems to give Waxer pause, it's likely way louder than normal. I can't hear shit! I think the blast has deafened me! Waxer pales, presses his lips together, and nods resolutely in understanding. Does your comm work? Mine doesn't, and we need to call for backup and healers! Boyle shakes his arm a bit to show the lack of lights coming from the comm. Waxer immediately starts digging into his pocket. So he wasn't wearing it when the blast hit? And brings up his comm. Unlike Boyle's, this one's lights are glowing. Waxer messes with it for a bit, then gives Boyle a thumbs up. He moves through a rapid series of field signs. We'll comm for backup and healers. Find the general. Before he turns to his comm and starts to enter a number sequence, likely for the Jedi Temple or the brothers still in the general's office. Senator Biwa and Imash are both dead. I haven't found anyone else besides you yet. Understood. Waxer's face is set in grim determination. Nodding resolutely to himself, Boyle gets to his feet. Waxer is fine, mostly, and now Boyle needs to find their general. Obi-Wan stares blankly into nothingness and tries very hard to keep breathing, despite the utter agony of it. He can't move. Even the tiniest of movements sends shocks of pain through him, worse than the constant throbbing of his chest. Breathing hurts, and he takes slow, shallow breaths. He's not getting enough air, he knows as much, but any attempt to draw deeper breaths sends a wave of pain through his systems. Better to try and minimize the pain felt and hopefully be able to keep his wits about him longer. What happened? He swallows and blinks a few times, trying to make his vision stop spinning. The dizziness is worse than any he can remember in recent history. It's much like the time when he contracted a rather bad concussion as a Padawan. He closes his eyes and swallows again, trying to keep his breathing even, if shallow, trying to stay calm despite it all. They had finished the meeting, and then... what happened? The senators? Waxer and Boyle. Where is everyone? Where is he? He looks around without moving his head. The disarray and destruction around him indicates some sort of explosion. No one else is here. What if they're all dead? What if he's the only one still alive? The Force is silent. It seems this explosion was what it was trying to warn him about. However, he walked straight into it. He brought Waxer and Boyle into it. If he'd gone alone, then at least they would have been safe. Now he doesn't know if they're even... He blinks his eyes open. The pain is constant, and the worst of it is in his chest. He should catalog his injuries. Try to focus and see if there's anything he can do something about. He should be trying to move, trying to find the others, and... What was he thinking about? He tries to focus, tries to remember, but his head is spinning, and he's in so much pain. Pain. Injuries. He was supposed to catalog his injuries. He opens his eyes resolutely. Sitting up is a far greater challenge than Obi-Wan could have ever imagined. He's barely lifted his head a millimeter off the ground before he must stop. The strain on his chest too painful. So, no sitting up to catalog his injuries. He'll have to do it lying down. Obi-Wan relaxes his facial muscles, keeps his eyes closed, and tries to even out his erratic and painful breathing once more. If he can't sit up and look, he'll have to catalog his injuries by what sort of pain he feels and where he feels it. The pain in his chest is similar to being stabbed. He recognizes the feeling well enough. His time as a Jedi has been fairly tumultuous, in great part due to the war, so he's been stabbed a few times before. However, those injuries were likely not as severe as the stab injury currently afflicting his chest, if there is such a thing as a stab injury that isn't severe. Clenching his eyes shut harder, Obi-Wan tries to focus on his breathing properly. He feels not just dizzy, but also lightheaded, as if he's not getting enough air. The horrifying thought feels familiar somehow. He pushes that away. He shouldn't get sidetracked. He needs to determine the severity of his stab wound beyond the obvious to the chest and very painful when breathing. He moves his left hand slowly, sliding it across his chest to try and find the wound. It doesn't take him long, and his hand closes around a long, round thing sticking out of his chest. The shock makes Obi-Wan stop breathing for what feels like an eternity. The feeling of having been stabbed, trouble breathing, his durasteel rod. Oh. Obi-Wan opens his eyes and angles his head, moving his chin toward his chest without lifting his head from the floor, ignoring the almost painful way his scalp scrapes against it. The angle is bad, the light is dim, and his vision is swimming. But Obi-Wan can still see the durasteel rebar, which must be piercing straight through his chest. Quite clearly. Blood gleams on its surface, and Obi-Wan has to swallow down panic. He's dying, isn't he? He hasn't heard anyone move, hasn't heard anyone so much as call for him, so help doesn't seem to be coming, and unless he gets help quickly. Even if the reinforcement bar is stopping the worst of the bleeding and hindering air from entering the chest cavity, he needs medical attention soon. He's dying. He's dying, and he'll die alone. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion. There is serenity. There is no chaos. There is harmony. There is no death. There is the Force. The mantra, familiar as it is no help here. Obi-Wan finds that he cannot find any peace or serenity in the uncertainty and pain of his situation. He's known he could die at almost any moment for years due to the war, and yet he clenches his eyes shut again, finds that he cannot stand to keep looking at the blood-covered piece of Dora steel any longer. He feels ill. There's a piece of Durasteel rebar going straight through his chest. The thought enters his head, panicked and unbidden, some of the last words he'll ever say to Anakin and Ahsoka. Like Master, like Padawan. Master Qui-Gon died by being pierced through the chest with a lightsaber, and now Obi-Wan will... The hysterical giggle wheezes out of his mouth. The shortness of his breath is as terrifying as the knowledge that he will die alone.
Obi-Wan, little one, please don't despair. Help will come. You must only hold on long enough.
Oh, that achingly familiar voice. Obi-Wan gasps for breath, every single one rattling his chest and sending spikes of pain through him. So this is how it will go. If there is no real companionship to be had as he dies, what happened to the others? Waxer and Boyle, the senators? Then it appears he will hallucinate some.
Oh, Padawan mine, you cannot give up now.
Qui-Gon's voice says strain and worry apparent in a way it rarely was in life. When Obi-Wan finally relents and opens his eyes, he's met with a sight he didn't expect. The illusion of his old, long-dead master is glowing, faintly blue, and quite see-through. Not solid and real-looking as he would have expected. Why would he hallucinate a ghost as his sole companion during his last moments?
Please, Obi-Wan, try to focus.
The ghost says and kneels down, bringing its face that much closer to Obi-Wan's own. One of its big hands brushes some stray hair out of Obi-Wan's face. It feels like a gentle breeze.
You will survive this, Padawan mine, because of your use of the Force.
The Force? What? He tries to remember. They had just finished the meeting and were heading out to have lunch, and then... Nothing. It's a blur. Why is he here? What happened? What did he do?
What?
He croaks.
You shielded yourself and the others close to you from the worst of the blast. Help will get here in time, Obi-Wan.
The blast? But others? What others? Oh, that's right. The senators, Waxer and Boyle, yes, they were close to him. Where are they? He's alone, wherever he is. Hallucinations don't count as company. Oh, he'll die alone. It's now that Obi-Wan realizes that for some reason he cannot quite understand. He always expected someone else to be there when he died. Perhaps Anakin during a mission gone wrong, or Ahsoka during the same. Perhaps Cody in the midst of war and battle. Perhaps surrounded by friends, old and finally at his end in the Jedi Temple. He's never considered dying alone. That's where he differs from his master. At least Master Qui-Gon didn't die in solitude. Pierced through the chest and definitely dying, Obi-Wan finds himself glad that he was there for his master's last moments. Whatever little comfort he might have been, because he sorely wishes for the same now.
Oh, Obi-Wan, please don't despair. I am one with the Force, and the Force is always with you, and so I am always with you. You must only hold on a little longer, and I am so very proud of you.
Oh, well, I was there, Obi-Wan wheezes, when you died. Perhaps it is fitting that I see you now when I die. It's so hard to breathe and so hard to speak. His eyelids feel heavy like slabs of Durasteel. Obi-Wan struggles to keep his eyes open, to keep looking at this mirage. Even if it's not real, it's a sight sorely missed. The ghost of his master looks so very sad suddenly, but Obi-Wan simply smiles at the mirage. He wishes he could be held like when he was young, just one last time, but he knows it's impossible. Hallucinations brought on by the spinning mind of a dying man cannot touch you. Master Qui-Gon's ghost says nothing more, simply leans over and kisses Obi-Wan's forehead. Obi-Wan finally closes his eyes. The pain is immense, but perhaps there is peace to be found in his dying moments after all. There is no death, there is the Force.